This is the only case I've ever had where I think potato chips saved this kid's life. Okay, so he's a young kid, and it's kind of a yawn case on your non-acute part of your ED, and it just says, palpitations after eating potato chips. So you figure out 23. What am I going to find here? Probably nothing. And he's got a pretty unexciting exam, but being old school, I still put my hand on people's foreheads for a temp check, and I put my hand on their heart, to sort of feel their PMI. And he had a pretty prominent PMI. So here's a parasternal lung. Is he ready to go home? Yeah, I mean, it's so big. When I first looked at it, I wasn't sure. Am I looking at an aorta? Is that the ascending aorta? So it's almost 8 centimeter diameter aorta. Okay, there's a 23-year-old kid that walks in, and I think the potato chips basically gave him a big salt load. And it just made him a little bit hyperdynamic, and kind of made these, made that large, ready-to-burst aorta kind of more prominent in his chest. You will be quite surprised at times at the stuff that walks in. And was it? No, he had no kind of Marfanoid, habitus at all. It was, again, not always. They don't always read the books. So it's just, that's a sort of a memorable aortic root to look at. Remember, you've probably heard about the third rule. The RV, the aortic root, and the left atrium usually occupy about a third each of that picture. Well, this aorta occupies about 60% of the whole. So when we do aortic root measurements, we kind of target this area right here at the sinotubular junction. The American Society of Echocardiography has various locations that they do their measurements at. We're not really interested in the wide area at the sinus of Valsalva. So where the sinus of Valsalva ends and you're kind of the beginning of that ascending aorta, that's sort of our typical measurement area. And the convention really is outer wall to inner wall. This isn't perfectly perpendicular. Ideally, you want to be perpendicular to the flow. So I would probably move that over a little bit over here, but outer wall to inner wall. And then just kind of an easy way to remember the numbers. 3.5 is probably a little low. I think 3.8 centimeters is more typical for a dilated aorta. But if you remember 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, it's just a way to remember where you have to intervene. By 4.5 centimeter dilation, you have an aneurysmal aorta that needs surveillance. On some every 6 months to 1 year basis with some kind of imaging, and after 5.5 centimeters, surgery or some kind of endovascular intervention is warranted.